Full communication, that is. Thank you very much. Thank you also very much for this little show. That's by now in today's program. So we're talking about technology in general. But in my presentation here, I would like to turn to the interactive media and interactive technology, because when you have communication within an area, so within a space, then you have the Internet of Things, for example, and also intelligence to include that into your space. And this is a point that is getting more and more interesting. So you link the virtual room with the physical room, and then you have an add-on value. But only if you use these technologies in a targeted manner, then you can support your event in a successful manner, but rather not make it just kind of media spectacle, so without any added value. So this is true independent of any other technology that may exist in the future as well. Just hang on a minute before I can get everything set up.
Einmal.
Guck mal, der Kollege vorher hat es ausgemacht.
Warte mal.
Hier an der Seite.
Ja.
Jetzt ist es
Geht er jetzt? Gut. Weiter geht's. Weiche Faktoren wie eine gute Geschichte.
So soft factors such as a good story, appropriateness, and also a user-friendly interface are very important for successful communication. You can also save money if you know beforehand what you are aiming for, and then decide on the technology to use to reach this goal as quickly as possible. So let me just give an example. So an example that my JobLab Partners company does. So our innovation laboratory worked a little bit on our new project. We had a little bit of software and hardware, and we had a couple of hours between the ongoing projects, and then we made use of our 3D printers and a little bit of people, so human power, so that was enough. So, for example, one interaction could be that the staff members were held hands, and then you take a picture of that. And then the outcome of this event was that there were quite a lot of pictures of the staff in all kinds of different groupings, and we got 3 awards, and because there were some very good, efficient and funny solutions, and there was also a narrative that linked people with one another. Without a good story, use of media and the usage of modern technology is just hot air. So if you have a good narrative, a good story, then you will set the frame and you will give meaning to your event, and then the audience gets also the chance of being included, and the people on site, they can interact with one another. And with these events, you also have rooms that people are not familiar with, and you meet people you may not know, and these people are not familiar to you sometimes, and sometimes they are. So, and it's very important to be aware of that. Even if you have highly complex and complicated technology, it is the story, the quality of the story, that decides whether your message gets through. So the story doesn't need to be complex itself. It can be very simple and short. So, for example, as some kind of door opener, you can use a very simple story. So here you see a curtain that was developed by Nicholas Roy, and with this curtain, so he was following people who wanted to watch him in his studio. So this is a curtain that stands for your privacy, and then but it behaves differently, and he behaves differently within the studio, and even people who were not interested in his work and in his studio, so they were attracted by this curtain and looked into the studio. So it is simple and a simple technology and a simple story. But I mean, if you don't have a good story, so if the technology is very difficult and very sophisticated, then you still won't reach people. So if you want to focus on the narrative, on the story, and not on the technology, then you can avoid falling into the technological trap. So because some kind of technical playing around doesn't work any longer, because we are oversaturated and we see them everywhere. So when you want to set something in a staged manner, then you need to be aware of where you are and what technologies you can use. And the technologies that you can use can even help you to make better use of the space that you have. Of the room itself becomes an object of the conversation without being the center of it. So as my colleague Imo Werner kept saying, so this is kind of an interactive fire around which people talk. So the room needs to be in line with the content and with the message. So, but it should not be the center. So the factors such as your figures for turnovers, that is nothing that we mean by that. So people should have the impression that the story can only be told here and can only work here where they are. They need to be aware that the room they're in and the story that they are listening is something that they cannot experience anywhere else, not in the office, not at home. So the technology can then impress them and it doesn't become arbitrary and cannot be replaced by anything else. Because technology in itself doesn't make non-interesting messages interesting all of a sudden. So the technology can enhance the message of a story. So this should be expressed by the run up to the decisions on the Olympic Games in the United States, and it was sponsored by Nike. And so the active routes for the runners were analyzed around the headquarters, and those visitors of the pre-selection meetings, they could look at the runners' routes and experience that. And this meant that Nike just made it possible for people to not only link the sports people, the athletes themselves, but also the participants of the meeting and also those who watched it. So here, another example from San Francisco. So this is an application that used the people and to give them a face. So 30,000 people, they got together in front of an abandoned shop, in front of the shop window, and people allowed pictures to be taken of them. And then these pictures were projected onto the front of the house opposite. So that means that people further away could see the pictures. And over a period of time of 6 months. So this was active, and the residents met there in front of the shop window, but they also met with people visiting their district. And so this was a possibility to get together, to exchange some experience and some content, and that creates a common and joint experience. So when you share content and contribute content, that can also mean a big challenge, and especially during an event, this is a big challenge with, for example, the controlling the messages that are projected on the walls and that you may not want. So, but it shows that in a physical room, in contrast to a virtual room, such as on Facebook. So, when you have this staging and this interaction, then you want to make sure that you are aware whether this is a physical room or a virtual room. So it depends on who participates and who's there and what the message is supposed to be. So you need to have courage and also trust the users. And that is expressed by this example from Anchorage, Alaska. So this is a high school which shows a lot of diversity of people from all kinds of ethnic groups in the United States. So you could draw the conclusion that you have a lot of young people, and this is a melting pot. And of course, this should be controlled in the messages and contents that you want to portray. So here you see the library of the school, and the students were allowed to be taken pictures of, and then through the main entrances, these were projected. So the portraits were split into different parts, and then the faces of the other students were combined in a different way. So this meant that a collage of all the students was then projected that shows the character of the school. So in a very clear way, and also externally as well as internally. So there was no controlling done. Nobody wanted to control anything, but rather just to show what the students themselves identified themselves with it. So that prevented any abuse of that story or of that technology. In order to have the appropriate technology, so then you should need to be aware of the situation. What is the situation like? Is it a guided situation? Is there an external guide? So then the technology should support the guide and not take attention away from the guide. And for example, are there hosts or hostesses that can help people when they start getting frustrated because they don't understand an interaction? Or is that a free flow situation? So that is that users are free to do whatever they want to. And of course, that means a lot of challenges with regard to providing access. So who are the users? Is that just one, or is there a number of users who are supposed to interact with them, with another, or is that just one host, one guide who organizes everything, and the others are just listening? So are we organizing this for one person, or for more, or for a special group? So it is better to reach out to a majority rather than just to a small minority, because when you have a targeted approach, then the word of mouth gets around, and so you get more reach. So that means the targeted approach is the way to go. So for example, you could just ask a question for who your target group is. Are these laymen? Are these experts? Are these young people? Are these adults? Or do I need to focus on one cultural background, or do I have several cultural backgrounds that I have to take into consideration, or do I have gamers or athletes as my target group? So, for example, when you're dealing with adults, I mean, they like to play games, but they shouldn't be childlike games. And in this context, you should not have something too stupid, because a selfie station is not just the best option always, because it's just a current trend. So, for example, you can just have a competition within your event. So create a mini event within your events. People will get together to compete in one way or the other, but you should always bear in mind whether some kind of game atmosphere is appropriate for your event, or whether they will turn your event into something unserious that people do not take seriously. So after having thought about all that, then you can decide on how to organize the technology and what media to use. So the technology should support the presenter if you have a presenter. So then, for example, set the background for a dialogue. And young people, for example, they are a lot more tolerant in terms of using modern media than older people, because older people tend to get more frustrated with modern technology when they don't know how to use them. In some situations, in fact, they do not allow diverse technologies to be employed at all, because touch screen technologies, for example, they require that you would see where you want to push the button. But for example, if you have a click button and just in your pocket, then you don't need to see it, but you just click in order to make your contribution. So it is very important. I mean, this one part of the appropriateness, but also accessibility is another important point. So the access to the media that you're using. So affordability and discoverability, I mean, these are two terms from action theory. So affordance means that the medium that you're using should show the user what they can do or what they are supposed to do. So the access needs to be easy and easy to use and unambiguous, because you don't want to read manuals and you don't want to be embarrassed by not understanding immediately what the technology is about and what you are supposed to do. So just a little bit of a tiny bit of insecurity just makes your technology fail. So then discoverability means that your user should have the possibility to explore something for themselves, and so without a presenter. So what we have here is some game in a way, so that you can use these notes and then you push them around on a table and you create a melody, and then you can use the entire table, the entire surface of the table for that. So a lot of people believe that if the system that is interactive and it doesn't react the way that you want it to do, then it is your mistake. But it is the other way around. So that is that the design of the medium was not appropriate and should need to be improved, and this is something that you should make your users aware. So in interaction within a room, it means also that you have an interaction in a public space. So when you want to control what is happening, then you need to bear in mind that people don't want to be embarrassed. So in a situation that they're put into. So that is if you want to have a serious context.
But of course, also then rooms or spaces can bring people together, and technology can then give them room for storytelling. For example, if you have people sitting here around a table, technology can also help at initial contact. For example, gathering information from social media to inform yourself as to whether people are attending this event. For example, do I know someone who knows someone, or who might be able to put me in contact? And this is all pre-event. These are all pre-event activities which then allow people to then enter and access the different topics. Sometimes it's also helpful to not show any technology. For example, you can see here, for example, a piece of cardboard that's just foldable, but if you put it and hold it under the spotlight of a projection, you can then also access a lot of information. And you don't see anything of the technology whatsoever except for that spotlight. And it is quite simply indestructible. And if you do manage to destroy the piece of cardboard, you just get another one. And this is the type of media that we can go towards. Now, if we are looking more towards the story and less to the technology, then we can actually hide the technology behind the story. The more you do so, the more impressive and also the more immersive and the story becomes. Now, coming back to the space in terms of creating a concept for media, it can lead to an experience that you cannot experience at home, for example. You can copy them, you can put them into a certain order and make them more accessible. For example, here, using the media of, for example, a specific area, looking at this here, and, for example, a railing here, by putting your hands behind your head and resting your elbows on the railing, then you also have vibrations that then contribute to the storytelling, and you can also share that, and that can also help then people build bridges between different spaces. For example, the story of Coca-Cola, they have many machines and vending machines across the world. And interestingly, passerbys were able to pass a vending machine and actually share bottles of Coca-Cola with someone in a completely different country. For example, here they were sharing then a Coca-Cola with someone in Pakistan. Or, for example, you can bridge time For example, here, the 400th birthday of Mannheim. And we had a tour, that it went on a tour across Germany, and visitors were able to remix the anniversary song and share different samples. And when they had produced their own personal version of the song, then they were able to save it, for example, on a cube, and that they could then take home and share with their friends and family, and also remix it, and also they were also able to add comments here. And that means that they were able to then make sure that the interaction and communication continued over a long period of time. Of course, it can be expensive over time and space, so it's worth thinking about not just one event, but also future events. Because this example of Mercedes, you can see here, it was a sample system in space and also in terms of interaction, had a lot of commonalities with previous projects. So when we were able to establish connectivity, we could further develop this concept over time with different samples so that we could move this concept forward. As you can see, it's also a very high-quality product. And this could be very interesting for events where you have a high number of participants. And you can also then of course, this means that you can make things more complex over time. And what's key here is that the stories are always updated and new, and the improvements within these media are then replicable within the samples, and you can see that developing over time. These are the three aspects in terms of interactive media and interactive technology in space should be then taken into consideration: storytelling, appropriateness, and also accessibility. A credible story that really involves people and creates a link to people, to the users, so that they are linked to the information and they are also enthused, that then also brings them to the point where they also want to exchange information. And I think that's where communication is going to be brought forward using this technology. Thank you very much.